So we widen the discussion out now to a panel discussion. Is Mr. Blakemore here? Come down. Come on down, Kev. Okay. Andy, would you like to join the panel? Four seats. PI and its re-engineering of partnership. We've had something on the new commissioning structures and CCGs, and we've had something on the private sector circle and disruptive innovation. So here's your opportunity to pick up some of those points or any other points. You want to ask me, for instance, because I'm a font of knowledge. Whatever. Here's your time to be reflective. You might want to just be discussive. Have a rant about the Royal College of Physicians, whatever. Over to you. If you could please use the microphones, and if our two kind ladies could make sure they're on, it would be helpful as the proceedings are being recorded, okay? Over to you guys. Let's break for lunch then. Who would like to make some reflections or comments on what you've heard so far? Well, what do you know? Quiet pharmaceutical devices diagnostics audit. Let me ask you some questions then. Maybe that will stir things up. Would you say that you and your boss and your company are prepared for the lights to be switched on, as the title of our last talk today is in terms of the new NHS from next April? Hands up. Do you want me to repeat the question? Yeah, very quiet. Are you prepared for all the changes?
Hands up
okay.
if you understand.
Let me turn it up. Who's not prepared? Okay. Whose fault is that? Would anybody like to make a comment on that? God, this is like playing chess. Okay, so can we have a microphone? Microphone switched on. Microphone. Whichever kind.
Hi, Alan. Kim Sargent from National Services for Health Improvement. I think an observation more than anything in terms of the current stasis, as it were, within pharma side and the NHS side. I sit in the middle. We're an independent third-party provider. We sit right in the middle and we do work across...
No promos.
No promos. But just in terms of, in that middle ground, we see challenges faced by pharma, and I think going back to the comments made by Kevin about the need to change behaviour, approaches, the whole thing, driven by the uncertainty of what is really happening within the NHS, with this constant, as we keep saying, it's an ever-changing story. You know, the record keeps going back in terms of, you know, where are we now? You started the whole meeting with this retro concept. I've always had the vision that there's a Rolodex in somebody's desk in Whitehall who just keeps flicking it and deciding which model we're going to have now, because it seems to keep going through that. And I think that's one of the challenges that the industry faces, but also the NHS faces, that within the NHS there is this uncertainty of where their future lies. I think you've got the power balance totally wrong within the NHS, within the acute sector and the primary care sector, and that big debate has still to take place in terms of bringing in the public's opinion on what really needs to happen. In my locality, our local hospital started to talk about changes that they need to make. Immediately, we've got the local council, the local press jumping up and down because you can't make these changes. And yet, as a provider of healthcare, the locality is struggling to meet quality standards for patients. So I think, just as an observation, that there's two sort of lines of stasis going on here, and inactivity is not going to fix or change where we need to go to. So I think there just has to be some very brave people making some very brave steps, and I think the time has come in terms of where people have to stop watching to see what does the first company do to see if they can then follow that.
Okay.
Alan, can I make an observation on this too?
Yeah, sure.
Are we sure that the public has got this one wrong?
I don't think the public has. I don't think the public have actually been involved. I think the problem is we've got people who are frightened to shake the tree to make it clear to people that things need to change. Because the people that started the debate in my locality was not the public. It was the people in positions either at that trust or in the local council who see this as a deficit. And one of them is actually off on her way to the jungle right now.
Blue in tooth and claw.
Question at the back, please. Can we have a microphone? Yeah, whichever side. Just a microphone. You tell us who you are and what you do, please.
Debbie Taylor from Nutricia. It's a question to Ali, actually, and based on the comment about losing contracts solely on price. Do you think the NHS actually accepts some responsibility over market sustainability? We're certainly in an industry at the moment where there are only 3 players, and at some point, 1 or 2 of those players will leave the market. And it's not an attractive market for industry, certainly from a nutritional healthcare point of view. And actually, if there is 1 player left in the market, then the costs will just all go back up again. And I just don't think the NHS always understand that.
No, you're absolutely right. I think the problem with the NHS is that all contracts are given on very short-term views, and we have a report that is about to be published. I've seen it under embargo on Hinchinbrook by the National Audit Office. It's very interesting to look at that. And it's interesting, we always end up being, we reply to the tender conditions they put in, and then we end up being the bad guys for having responded to the questions to win the tender, right? So, but you're right, it'll invariably end up, because the problem is that you were referring, Paul, to the list of 100 people, I don't know, whatever it is that they glorify themselves on. You look at that list, every year 50 of the 100 change. It's very interesting, right? So nobody's there long enough, almost, to take responsibility for when things go wrong. But they do get killed if they don't follow the processes and procedures and can't tell the National Audit Office that within the 2 months I got you the thing. So it's not their fault, it's the entire system we created. That, I mean, we've become a country of blames. I mean, we just blame everybody for everything.
The NHS doesn't always let very short-term contracts, of course.
Of course.
PFI contracts, that's typically 25 to 40 years. Ali, your Hinchinbrook contract's a decade, isn't it? It's 10 years. So, but in terms of those kinds of procurements, I think it depends which bit of the NHS you go to as to how commercially naive they are. I've got colleagues who are commissioners down in the southwest, which in an area which isn't oversupplied with local hospitals. And when there is this rhetoric about shutting a DGH and doing everything in the big foundation trust in the city, one of my colleagues, who's a commissioner, is not so sure that that's a good thing, because then his leverage is gone as a negotiator. So I think, all generalisations are dangerous, even this one. The NHS has pockets of, I think, astute performance on commissioning and very poor performance on commissioning, and most people are somewhere in the middle. I mean, before PCTs got reorganised out of existence, the Health Service Journal published a ranking of all their world-class commissioning ratings and actually found quite significant improvements. So obviously the opportunity cost every time we disorganise the NHS, apart from getting everybody to apply for their own jobs back for 18 months, which is not actually unknown in the industry, I believe, as well. So I think that there might be a little mutual sympathy thing that could go on. Is that a way you would sensibly seek to run a business? I mean, Ali rightly berates the HSJ 100 list, not because the HSJ are bad, but simply it's the list of the 100 most powerful people you've heard of in the NHS. Really effectively, there are a handful of names that you need to know. the most important thing you need to know to understand about the NHS is how the money flows around the system and what the targets are. And, you know, we have completely replumbed the money. We have completely changed the targets. But ultimately, for you as an industry, you need to know what the new targets are because they're your business plan.
Can I just clarify? I actually think, my point is there is one thing you can generalize about the public sector as a whole, and that is we made it impossible for public servants to do the job. I mean, if you think you got a tough job, just think about you are a commissioner who give a contract to somebody, and how many busybodies do you have to second guess your judgment almost before you've given it? And that's the problem. So the problem is not the individuals, the problem is not even the organizations, the problem is a system we created that there is no winners in it. So you take Hinchinbrook, if we do really well, the guys who gave us the contract on the other side will get no credit whatsoever. We are the ones who were the heroes who done it well. If that thing goes wrong in that process or during the process of giving it to us, you should have seen what happened to these guys. I mean, they're lucky to have kept their job. I mean, the courage, the steadfastness they had to deliver it. And even now that it's gone, they don't leave them alone. There is a National Audit Office thing, there is this, there is that, there is the other. And so I think, I agree with you, that the people on the other side of the table from us, I think they have a much worse job. It's just like when you go to a school, I'm sure many of you do work around thing, and you see these kids or somewhere in disadvantaged schools who behave so badly, and you could just turn back and say they're really bad, or you could turn back and say what kind of family conditions do they come up, what kind of pressures are they in that it's getting them to behave the way they do. And I think a lot of our civil services are under similar kind of pressures that is making them impossible to be good commissioners.
Okay. So, Kevin, here's a question for you. A significant majority of this audience think that their bosses and their companies are not ready for the lights to be switched in April. Why are you messing around with all this partnership stuff, and why aren't you helping the companies get ready for the brand new world of payers in April 2013?
Good question. I think one of the things that needs to happen with this, and Ali has talked about it, and others have talked about it today as well, is the issue of leadership. Somebody has got to start changing something. If we carry on doing the same things we've always done and expect a different result, we're all going to be really disappointed. So we've got to change something. It's about taking risk. It's about taking calculated risk. And this thing about being brave, and there's the guys with Hinchinbrook being brave who set up the whole contract. We've all got to start doing that. And I think the ABPI is positioned well to be able to start leading that process. And there will be others who come with us early. Some people will come later. But I don't think there's a problem with that. You've got to feel comfortable with what you're doing as organisations and how you move this agenda forward. The quote that I often use when I do presentations to audiences on partnership at the end of it is, a genius is someone who sees a target that no one else can see and hits it. This industry, the public sector, is full of people who have good ideas of being geniuses. Let's all start working together and using that. We're all patients of this system. We have a collective responsibility to make it as good as it can be. Our taxes pay for it. I get really passionate about this because I don't want to see my money wasted on processes and treatments and things that do not add real value to me, my family, my extended family, to everybody in this room in terms of getting better outcomes for the money we spend on it. We need to start helping make that happen.